Okay, this is Michael O'Hearn. Now, I recall last time I was talking a little bit about the church here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Archdiocese, and although I live in Albuquerque, we do belong to the same Archdiocese of Santa Fe. And it just looks as though there's a lot of problems here because when they do allow people to assist at Mass, they require a lot of different protocols which are not actually necessary in terms of any type of ability to prevent a virus transmission. Particularly, they require people to wear some kind of a face covering, which has absolutely nothing to do with this particular mechanism by which this virus is transmitted. In other words, people can go ahead and wear a face covering, and whether or not they're going to contract the virus makes no difference, the fact that they're wearing a face covering, because people are going to contract it, and then after a while there's going to become this what they call a herd immunity, and then a certain percentage of the population gets the virus. They have the herd immunity, and then it drops down, and then later on, and when the weather changes in terms of beginning in fall or winter, then it comes back again. You see, that's just the normal cycle of a virus, like COVID or anything like that, coronavirus. You see, most coronaviruses are simply like the common cold. Now, the problem with this particular one is that someone, somewhere, perhaps in the United States, perhaps in Canada, or even in China, have figured out some kind of a way to bring in other types of viruses, for instance, or types of disease transmission factors, such as, for instance, like HIV or something like that. Now, we know that happened with this particular virus because it has elements of HIV that were actually brought into the particular virus, the cold virus, you see. But this was all done within a laboratory. Now, whether it was in the United States or whether it was in Canada or whether it was in China, what we know now is that somehow it got to China. It was stored because they have a lot of these different types of engineered viruses in China, in Wuhan particularly. Now, there's a whole another side of this, because there were actually people here in America that founded that worked with those people there in China to establish a particular lab. So it's not all just one sided. It's not just all China. They knew what they were doing because they wanted to create this terrible situation in America. So what we have here now is we got the virus. It's been modified to make it more easily spread among people. For instance, at a much closer at a distance, which is not like a common cold. In other words, you could be maybe 6-10 feet back from someone and get the particular virus, but it's much more damaging as well, because they put something in there to make it so that it would damage the lungs, you see, in a human being. Just like, for instance, HIV virus or whatever. In other words, they knew that this was going to make it go, in other words, within the population. And this is, in other words, there were some very evil people. I would, I have some kind of a conception in my own mind as to how this happened, but it wasn't just in China, because the Chinese could care less about any of that thing. They wanted people to build up their reserves, etc. They wanted to get people to come in and make them stronger. So they invited people in, and that's how it got there. With the virus got there in their lab, and then somehow it was released from their lab. Now they first blamed it on some kind of a bat in a fish market. Well, that's complete nonsense. It was never there never was any bat in a fish market there in Wuhan, because it wasn't that kind of a virus. It was from a bat originally, but that was modified and within a lab. So whether it got out accidentally or whether this was planned, you see, it was actually planned, because the people that came up with this knew that the lab facility in Wuhan, China, could not have contained the virus for very long, because their level of security or protocol was not that very high there, you see. They knew that it was going to eventually get out. Some was going to contract the virus, and then it was going to spread from Wuhan and then other places throughout the world. But so here's the thing. We don't know whether the communist Chinese wanted to start this virus so that they could gain some kind of a relative one-upmanship over the rest of the world, or whether it was simply an accident. But it looks to me like their goal was to create this within the lab and then release it at some point, and that they wanted particularly to release it in Italy, because a lot of their workers were there from China, were working there in the textile industry, etc. And they wanted to release it there, but somehow the epicenter became located right there in China, which is a very big embarrassment to the Chinese regime, because that basically locked them into the responsibility that they have, because they created this whole thing, you see. But it's an extremely evil thing. It's worse than what the Nazis did during World War II. So, in other words, because this is going to shut down economies, people, in other words, they're going to be there's going to be food shortages throughout the world, things like that. In other words, people are very inconvenienced throughout the world, and people are going to die, which has nothing to do with the virus, but it's only because of this so-called lockdown. So in other words, China has the primary responsibility, because they somehow had the virus and they got out, got out from Wuhan, spread throughout the world from there. But so we have to be very careful. I mean, and this could result actually, because you see, China now thinks they have a comparative advantage or a relative power over the rest of the world. In other words, they think that they've made gains in terms of their relative status as far as a superpower in the world. So they may decide to extend their boundaries into the Pacific, South Pacific Sea, and that's why it's very important now with this election coming up that we get the right person elected, because if we get the wrong person, they're going to either play into what China is trying to do and go ahead and get us into a war against a war which we will lose, and we will be many of our cities will be destroyed by nuclear weapons, possibly from Iran, possibly from Korea. But the other possibility is that we will have someone who will be in office who will be able to take the situation under control. So I think we all know who we want to elect a president to keep everything under control. It's very important that you think about this when you go to vote in November. Don't buy into this mail-in ballots, because that's a bunch of nonsense. It's all fraudulent to destroy our democratic process here in America. So I guess that's all, but the main thing is, don't worry about getting infected by the virus, but don't go along with what they're trying to impose upon us. It's not so much our government, but some people that are controlling the people in government, you see. Some very evil people. And these are the people that we have to basically take out and destroy. These are our enemies. There are people like that in China, as well as here in America and throughout the world, in Europe in particular, and throughout the world. Russia is basically acting responsibly, but most of the rest of the world is not doing that, because they're following these ridiculous people that are trying to impose more tyrannical structures on the whole world, and getting control of everybody in the whole world, you see. And they do not have the right to do this. They are evil people, and they must be brought down, and they must be punished with the full extent of what the law will allow to do against them, because they are very bad people. Thank you, and goodbye.